I'm William Michael. I'm the headmaster of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and in this video, I'd like to provide an introduction for students who are going to be studying our Latin vocabulary course. This book that we use in this course is an important book in educational history. It was published by a well-known Protestant schoolmaster named John Comenius. It was intended to provide young students with a Latin vocabulary book that would help them to learn and build a great Latin vocabulary in an entertaining and easy way. These were centuries where the printing press was still just getting developed and books were becoming more readily available. Before this period, books were so expensive that these kinds of things couldn't be given to children. But here we see one of the first picture books ever published for children, and its purpose was to teach Latin vocabulary. In this course, we'll study over 100 different topics or lessons filled with Latin vocabulary. And in this lesson, I'd like to walk you through this first topic, which is simply an invitation or introduction to the study. At the top of the page, you see the title of this book, which reads Orbis Sensualium Pictus. And what this means, the word pictus means pictures, and then orbis means of the world, and sensualium means of sensible things. So pictures of the world of sensible things. And what Comenius does in this book is give us a picture in each lesson, like the picture we see in the middle of our screen. And that picture contains images of the things that are described in the lesson, and we learn the vocabulary, we learn the names of things we see in the picture. In the old days, in old schools, these books were called nomenclators. And what that means is a book of names, because it was through these books that children built and learned their Latin or Greek vocabulary. So let's walk through this first lesson together. I'll read through the Latin with you and help you see how the book works so that you can begin studying on your own. First of all, you can see the title of chapter 1 in English, invitation, and you see the Latin word which is equivalent to invitation, invitatio. We have a picture here, and underneath the picture you see the title Magister et Puer. Magister et Puer. And here you see the English translation. The master, that's for magister, and puer is the boy. The boy's name, puer, that's the Latin word for boy, and the Latin word for master is magister. Here, the word master can simply be translated into another English word as teacher. So the teacher and the boy, magister et puer. And we have a discussion or dialogue between the magister and the puer. You can see over here that the first line begins with an M, that stands for magister, and the second line begins with a P, that stands for puer. So these are the lines of the magister and the puer having a discussion, speaking back and forth to one another. On the right side, we have the Latin, and on the left side, we have the English. So let's go ahead and walk through this first discussion in lesson 1, the discussion between the magister and the puer. The magister says, Veni, puer, dice sapere. Veni, puer, dice sapere. This first word, veni, is a command. It translates into English as come. Veni, puer, come boy. Dice Dice means learn. And sapere means to be wise. Veni puer, dice sapere. Come, boy, learn to be wise. Now, what you should do is look on each side of the lesson, learn the Latin word, veni, and then learn its English equivalent, come. Puer, boy. Dice, learn. Sapere, to be wise. And that's how you use these lessons to learn the vocabulary. Now the boy, the puer, responds to the magister and asks, quid hoc est sapere? Quid hoc est sapere? The Latin word quid means what. The Latin word hoc means this. Est is Latin for is, and sapere means to be wise. So what the Latin means literally is what this is, to be wise. That's literally what the Latin says, but we see the English translation gives it a clearer meaning. It's translated as, what does this mean, to be wise? This is the boy's question. Now, that may be confusing since the Latin doesn't translate perfectly or literally into English, but you'll notice that the word sapere is in italics. Can you see how sapere is written in italic letters? Sapere is the real vocabulary word that this lesson is focused on. And if you look over into the English text, you can see that to be wise is also in italics. So while there are many words in these lessons, the words that are most important to the lessons are set in italics. We're going to make sure that we memorize the words in italics and their English meanings, but the other words we're simply going to study to become familiar with different Latin words. Okay? Let's continue the discussion. The magister answers the boy's question. What does this mean, to be wise? The magister says, first, intelligere recte. Intelligere recte. Intelligere means to understand. And recte means rightly. Intelligere recte, to understand rightly. Second, agere recte. Agere recte. Agere means to do or to act. And recte again means rightly. The word et means and. The word eloquui means to speak. And again, recte means rightly. Actually, here you can see eloquui is translated to speak out. Omnia necessaria, all things that are necessaria, necessary. Notice that there are no words in italics in that sentence. So we're going to study that and read that to become familiar with those Latin words. But this is not something to be memorized for this lesson. The boy asks another question. Here we see P for puer, and he asks, quis docebit me hoc? The Latin word quis means who. Docebit means will teach. Quis docebit? Who will teach? The Latin word me is translated into, or me, is translated into English as me, and hoc means this. Quis docebit me hoc? Who will teach me this? And the magister answers, ego, or I. I will teach you. Cum Deo. Cum Deo literally means with God. I will teach you with God. And the English explains this a little more and says, I, by God's help. That's what it means. Cum Deo, with God's help. Then the boy asks, Quo modo? Quo modo? And we see quo modo means how. How will you teach me? And the Magister responds, Ducam te per omnia. Ducam means I will guide, or I shall lead. Te means you. Per means through. And omnia means all things. We saw that word omnia back up top in a previous sentence. Ducam te per omnia. I shall lead you, or I shall guide thee through all things. Ostendam tibi omnia. Ostendam means I will show, or I shall show. Tibi means to you. Omnia, all things. Nominabo tibi omnia. I shall name for you tibi omnia. The boy then says, En, which means look or see. En, ad sum. Ad sum means here I am. Ducme. Ducme means lead me. In nomine Dei, in the name of God. En ad sum. See, here I am. Ducme in nomine Dei, in the name of God. The Magister then goes on to introduce the second half of this lesson, which we're actually not going to study, but you're welcome to read it and learn it and become familiar with it, and you'll probably enjoy it. The Magister says here, ante omnia. Ante means before, omnia, all things. Before all things, before we get started, in other words, debes, you ought, dicere, to learn, simplices sonos, the simple sounds, ex quibus, out of which, sermo humanus, human speech. Sermo, we see sermo here is in italics, and over here we see the English speech is in italics. Sermo humanus is translated as man's speech. It could also be translated as human speech. And constat means consisteth. Quos animalia sciunt formare. Quos means which. Animalia means living creatures. Sciunt means know. Formare means to make. Et tua lingua scit imitari. And thy tongue, lingua, knoweth, scit, how to imitate, imitari. Et tua manus potest pingere. And tua manus, thy hand, potest, can, pingere, picture out or draw. So what the Master says here is, before all things, before we study all these things, you ought to learn the simple sounds out of which human speech consists, which the animals know to form, and your tongue knows to imitate, and your hand can draw out or picture out. He then says, postea, afterwards, ibimus, we will go, mundum. And here you see the translation is into the world. So afterwards, ibimus, we shall go, and then a preposition, in, which means into, is left out. And we have mundum in italics. And here we see world is its English meaning. Afterwards, we shall go into the world. Et, and, spectabimus, we will view omnia, all things. Now, after this invitation to study all of the world of sensible things, we have this interesting little guide to the sounds of the letters. What the author teaches here is that all of the sounds of the letters can be found in the sounds made by different animals or natural things. So, for example, cornix is the name for the bird, which is a crow. The cornix cornicator. The cornix, the crow, crieth, ah, ah. And so the author says, if you want to learn to pronounce the sound of the letter A in Latin, listen to the crow. If you want to learn to pronounce the sound of the Latin letter B, listen to the lamb. Agnus balat. The lamb bleateth, be, be. And so the author goes on through the rest of this fun little lesson, teaching the sounds of the letters of the Latin alphabet based on the different sounds made by the animals and other natural things like the wind. Here we see auriga clamat, that means the chariot driver or the carter shouts or cries. And we see above here also the wind blows, the mouth breathes, and so on. So this is a fun little lesson on the sounds of the Latin letters based on all different natural sounds that we hear around us or can learn about pretty easily. So that's the content of Lesson 1, the invitation to the study of the pictures of the world of sensible things in Comenius's book, Orbis Sensualium Pictus, which we're going to study in our Latin vocabulary course. Now, to study this lesson, you should go back through and read the Latin and then look over and understand the English translation and try to match the phrases word for word or phrase for phrase. Become as familiar as you can with the meaning of the Latin words, but pay special attention to the words that are in italics, like sapere, and make sure you memorize those words and their English meanings. That's the goal of this chapter. Then, look at the pictures in the lesson and see if you can point and name different things in the picture. In this first lesson, the only thing we can really name in this picture is the magister and the puer. So when we get into future lessons, there will be more and more things that will actually have numbers next to them to help us identify their names. So study this lesson. Become familiar with as much of the Latin as possible, memorize the words that are in italics, and we'll begin in our next lesson the study of the first real topic in Comenius's Orbis Sensualium Pictus. I hope that's a helpful overview of this first lesson. If you have any questions about this lesson, please contact me, and I'll happily help you. God bless your studies.